Welcome to Poor Millionaires. In part one of this three-part series on gold, I'm joined by Dominic Frisby, author of The Secret History of Gold. We pick over the precious metals' current bull market and why gold drives humanity to do great and terrible things. Poor Millionaires is a show for people with investable wealth of $1 to $20 million. We strive to educate, connect and inspire, to give you the tools you need to thrive and secure lasting prosperity for yourself and for your family. PoorMillionaires.com. Invest with ambition. This podcast is for educational purposes only. The information does not constitute financial advice or recommendation and should not be considered as such. The value of investments and any income derived from them can fall as well as rise, and you may not get back the original amount you invested. Dominic Frisby, welcome to the Poor Millionaires podcast.
Thank you very much, sir. Lovely to be here.
It's great to finally have you on the show. I'm struggling for an introduction because you do so many different things. You're a comedian, you're a songwriter, you're an author, a journalist, an investor. I mean, have I missed anything from that list?
No, that's it.
How do you find the time to do so many different things? And also, how did you kind of stumble across this portfolio career?
I stumbled across it accidentally, and if I had more, I'd probably do all of these things. If I did fewer things, I'd probably do them better. I don't advise a portfolio career like I have. Fair
enough. So we're here to talk about the secret history of gold.
And absolutely, yes.
Here, which it's a brilliant read. It's a page turner. I recommend everybody go out and buy it.
Oh, thank you very much.
So the way I describe the book is it's pretty much a biography of the shiny yellow metal that we call gold. Obviously, with the recent rise in the gold price, it's pretty prescient. And my first question, I guess, is what was the genesis of the book? You know, why did you write it, basically?
Well, I've been writing about gold for 20 years. I kind of know the subject backwards, and it was an obvious thing to write a book about just because I know the subject so well. And then I did a show at the Edinburgh Festival, a lecture. I do these lectures with funny bits every year, and I did one about gold. A previous year I did one about tax, and that became a book. And so I used the Edinburgh Festival to sort of generate material. And I did one about gold, and it sold a lot of tickets. It's a popular subject. And it was just the next, I've written a book about gold. I've written a book about tax. I've written a book about Bitcoin. I've written a book about life after the state, my first book about sound money more generally and small government and all that kind of thing. It was just the next logical thing to write a book about. And there are just so many good stories with gold. And we kind of think it's this irrelevant metal, but I think it's probably inspired human beings to do the bravest, boldest, most terrible, most wonderful, most inventive, most dastardly things in all human history. It's been because it's wealth in its purest form. Gold has driven humankind in a way that maybe only sex and food and shelter can compete with. And I think once people have got their sex, food and shelter, gold is the single biggest driver of human progress.
Yes, it's interesting because I think most people, people know gold as jewelry. It was the most basic sort of use, I guess. But the way that gold kind of it permeates all aspects of human existence, and you really do get that impression from the book. You describe gold as more than just a metal, and it's almost like it takes on a character of itself in the story of civilization. Just give our audience a flavour of what you mean by that.
Well, obviously gold in itself is just a metal, but it's the emotions and the ambitions that it inspires. And there's a great story that I tell in the book of it was actually Ruskin, the critic, used to tell the story. But there was a man went to sea with all his gold with him, and he had however many bags of gold, and the ship went down, and they had to jump off the ship to survive. And he took his gold with him, all his wealth, in some bags round his waist, and sunk to the bottom of the sea and died, obviously. And Ruskin says, had he the gold or had the gold him? And that's a sort of great metaphor. And we think gold is, you're right about jewellery. 50% of gold use is jewellery. But it was actually the very first metal that human beings used. And it has no use. It's useless. I mean, it has some industrial uses in outer space, nanotechnology, electronics, but in the grand scheme of things, gold industrial use is insignificant. Its only use is to store wealth and display wealth. That's its only use. And again, Bernstein, the historian, says nothing is as useful and is useless at the same time.
It's almost like its uselessness is its use.
Exactly. That's the paradox. That's exactly right, James. And because of its, but it was the first metal that when we were Stone Age men, we came across, we would have encountered 7 native metals, and each of those native metals has a day of the week named after it. And by native metal, I mean a metal that you can find in nature in its pure form. And gold was one of them, copper, silver, tin, iron, and so on. And we were using gold. We found little nuggets of gold in riverbeds, and alluvial gold, basically, and it was much more common once upon a time than it is now, because all the alluvial gold's been found, or most of it. And we would literally pick it up, and it would glint and shine, as it does. Gold never stops shining. You can dig up a Viking hoard 1,500 years old and it'll still be shining. And we would just wear it along with beads and shells and precious stones and other things. We wore it as jewellery. We would give it out as prizes, as rewards and so on, and maybe even use it as a tool of barter. So it was performing, when we were Stone Age men, the same function that it performs now. We wear it. And we use it sometimes as a tool of exchange, but as a store of wealth, as prize, gold medals, as reward, gold stars, and as adornment, jewelry. And so its role has never changed. And in the same way that the function of food has never changed, and the function of shelter has never changed. Obviously, the form that food takes and the form that shelter takes, but. And we got better at making jewelry than we had in the Stone Age times, but its basic role was the same, and that role is to be money. It's wealth in its purest form. Now, when you say money, people think of medium of exchange, but obviously the money has 3 functions: medium of exchange, store of wealth, and unit of account. And gold is the single best unit of account there is in all human history, because it never changes. It's constant. It's immutable. It doesn't oxidize. It doesn't tarnish. It never loses its shine. And I always say this on podcasts, but that little bit of gold that you have as a ring on your finger or around your neck or whatever, it's exactly as it was before the Earth was formed. Whether the Earth was formed by divine creation or interstellar collisions or whatever your narrative is, doesn't matter. The gold was there, and it compressed into the earth, and that's how it got into the earth, and it was shining then, and it's still shining now. And so it is the constant. In fact, there was an old academic called Jastrom who wrote a book called The Golden Constant. And so why we don't use gold as a unit of account officially, we obviously use pounds and dollars and so on, because we have to declare our earnings to the government and pay taxes in pounds and dollars, and so we declare our turnover in pounds and dollars. But we really should use gold because it's constant. And if you actually measure, it's a very useful tool. A lot of financial analysts use gold. They'll measure house prices in gold, or they'll measure the oil price in gold, or they'll measure the Dow in gold. And it's a very useful indicator because it's because gold is the constant. If you measure the Dow in dollars, it never stops going up. But obviously, it's part of that is that the dollar loses 7 to 10% of its value every year. So really, the Dow, by going up 10 or 12% a year, it's barely beating the depreciation of the dollar.
Yeah. I guess the same thing with gold. People see the gold price going up and they think, oh, gold's becoming more valuable. But when in actual fact, it's just that we're debasing currencies, and it's the currencies that are kind of value against gold.
I mean, companies are growing and economies are expanding, but the measure that we use, fiat money, is depreciating. And I think the pound's lost 40% in the last 5 years since 2020. 40%. It's extraordinary. So stock market when you look almost doubled.
Put it against things, like food prices, for instance. I mean, the things that people actually need, and not the retail price index.
And food should get cheaper.
Yeah.
because we get better at making it. And but one of the things you can do is there's a story that King Nebuchadnezzar bought 300 loaves of bread for an ounce of gold. Well, if you bought 300, you could buy a lot more than 300 loaves of bread for an ounce of gold today because we've got better at making bread. But the gold is exactly the same. Similar, the Roman, everyone knows the Roman toga story. You can buy a Roman toga and sandals for the same price for the same amount of gold as you would buy a smart suit in Savile Row today, and so on. And there's a story about lambs and how much gold it took to buy a lamb in the Quran, and you get more lamb today because we're better at farming lambs. But so gold is the constant, so we should use it as a unit of account. And of course, even though gold isn't official money anymore, and we long since left the gold standard, we still use it as a store of wealth. And even central banks still keep more than 20% of their assets in gold. And that number's increasing. It's doubled over the last 10 years. Pretty good for something that is unofficial. And, obviously gold ETFs and gold jewelry and gold bullion and at the corporate level and at the personal level, we still use gold as a store of wealth. And all you're doing by wearing jewelry is, I've got my little gold necklace that I wear, and you can see I've got my little gold ring. But that's storing wealth as well. It's just instead of burying it in the ground, I'm keeping it on my person. And, my eldest son, has already bagsied this necklace when I die. And hopefully he'll go on wearing it. And, he'll change the dangly bit, the leather that I keep it on, but he'll keep the little bit of gold. And this little bit of gold will outlast humankind. It's incredible metal.
I think that's one of the themes that runs through the entire book, and it's really quite profound in today's world where change is so rapid. Is the fact that gold has stood the test of time. We're not talking just for like 100 years or something. We're talking for like thousands of years throughout the entirety of human history. I just wondered what during the course of your research for the book. What are the most kind of surprising episodes that you kind of uncovered in Gold's past? Because, as you alluded to earlier, kind of gold has driven human beings to do some like really crazy, terrible things, but also some like really amazing things through history.
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought I knew everything there was to know about gold, and of course, when you write a book, there's a surefire way of discovering more things about gold that you didn't already know. And in fact, we just had a surfeit of material. I could have written a book about just gold and the Nazis because there's just so much material. That book, there's a whole. In fact, there have been books written about gold and the Nazis, Penguin, the publisher, wanted to cap it at 60, 70,000 words, and I wrote well over 100,000. So there's a lot we left on the table. As to use an investor's expression, there's a lot that didn't make it, but there are just so many stories, and I don't know what the most amazing one was. I mean, there's incredible stuff with the gold and the Nazis, what the Nazis did to get gold, and a lot of it's pretty brutal and pretty gruesome. But I find it quite comical that when the Nazis invaded a country, literally the very first thing they did on the day of the invasion is they would go straight to the central bank and confiscate the gold and send it home. And so you just had these farcical scenes of countries being invaded trying to get their gold out, and with the Nazis chasing the gold. In the case of the Polish gold went all the way across Poland, down into Romania, then to Turkey, then to Lebanon, then to France. Then when the Germans invaded France, it went to the southwest of France, and from there it went to Senegal. No, it went to Morocco, to Casablanca, then to Senegal, then to Martinique, and some of it ended up in Canada, and a little bit ended up in New York, and it just went everywhere, and just trying to escape it from the Nazis. So that all those, the story of the Norwegian gold is one of the most incredible stories you'll ever hear about how the Norwegians. There was a guy called Magnus Holland who had yellow fever, and he didn't even know he had yellow fever, and people were so brave in those days, but he didn't even know he had it, and he was tasked with getting the gold as the Germans invaded Norway. He had to get it from Oslo to Lillehammer, and then eventually he got it over across to Britain. But all the while the Luftwaffe are bombing, and he's in the end he got it in a load of little chug fishing boats up through the Norwegian fjords up there up on the coast. And, hiding gold in fishing boats, local fishing boats, because they thought the Luftwaffe wouldn't investigate local fishing boats. Incredible stories of bravery. And one I always like is Jason and the Argonauts. the gold rushes of the 19th century, particularly California, but also Australia and South Africa. The dude who's discovered the Witwatersrand gold in South Africa, and that little gold reef, 30 miles long, 2 miles deep, has accounted for 40% of the gold that's ever been mined. 40% of all the gold, and all the gold that's ever been mined still exists. So 40% came from that one reef in South Africa, and the whole of South Africa was built on the wealth from those gold mines, and that's why South Africa was so much wealthier than all the other countries in Africa because because of the gold rush, and the guy who sold it just thought he'd found a little patch of alluvial gold, and so, his name was George Harrison. He was an Australian prospector, and he sold his discovery for £10. Like the worst business deal in history, I reckon.
Sounds a bit like the guy who bought the pizza with the Bitcoin. Or
I think this is even worse than that. But yeah, it's still yeah. So those are some of the stories. I mean, there's just no end of them. In fact, I was at one stage on my blog, and you should all sign up for my blog, The Flying Frisbee. But I was just posting every week a story that didn't make it in the book, and they were very popular.
Yeah.
In Italy, when the Allies came up through southern Italy, and then the Germans actually took Italy after the Italians surrendered. The Italians were in this ridiculous situation where they had loads of gold. They didn't want to give it to the Nazis. The Nazis were demanding it. They didn't want to give it to the Allies. They didn't want to give it to the Bank of Switzerland. So the central bank built he built a false wall. Like in one day, as everyone was closing in on Rome, and he built this false wall and hid all the gold behind the wall. And then he got nervous because he thought the Germans would find the paperwork that showed that the gold hadn't been sent anywhere. And so he got nervous, and then, his boss got nervous and choked, and then got rid of the false wall. It was so funny, the idea of hiding the nation's gold behind a false wall in a vault.
Well, hidden in plain sight, I guess.
Well, exactly.
But so that's kind of like history. The gold past. But so what about gold's future? Because it's becoming so pertinent to what's going on now, isn't it, in the Western world, with kind of like the debasement of currencies and the prospect of, or at least the kind of desire for a return to an honest system of money, and gold's kind of role within that. And obviously, like throughout the book, it's made very clear that the fiat money system we're currently living under has a lot to answer for in human history, and it's not just when it comes to kind of the inflation problem, but also in terms of funding wars. Because I think there's a point in the book where you're talking about World War One and the fact that it wouldn't have been able to happen if they'd have kind of stuck to the gold standard.
Yeah, fiat money enabled that war, and that's something I say very often. The war would have had to end when the gold ran out. There wasn't the gold to pay for it, but Germany, France, and to an extent England all abandoned their gold standards in order to print the money to pay for the war. It just couldn't have happened under the discipline of gold. But anyway, the future of gold is very interesting, and there's the debasement of currency arguments, and they've been around for a long time, and I'm sure your listeners all know them. So I won't rehash them here. But what is changing, what is different about this gold bull market to previous gold bull markets is, and by the way, the gold bull market of the 70s and the gold bull market of the noughties, which ended in 2011 with the Greek debt crisis, by the time those bull markets were climaxing, we thought we were returning to some kind of official role for gold as money. Particularly in 1980, bear in mind, when gold went to 850 in 1980, we'd only abandoned the gold standard for 9 years. And when Nixon abandoned the gold standard in 1971, he said it was temporary. So gold was still very much in people's minds. And so, the narrative got stronger and stronger as the bull market climaxed. And so I'd just be very careful with this gold bull market. If it kind of climaxes, we're going back to gold, we probably aren't. Not officially. But however, what is different about this gold bull market is that there's two dynamics in place. Firstly, central bank ownership of gold reached a low in around 2014, 2015, around about then. 10% of central bank holdings were held in gold. Now that number's doubled. We're now at over 20%. And since 2014, 2015, central banks have been net buyers. And there's a process going on called de-dollarization, and it's accelerated since 2022 when Russian US dollar assets got seized, confiscated. Not every country in the world is an ally of America. They might not be an enemy of America. They might be a trading partner, but at the same time, they might not be like, America's poodle like the UK is. And China is obviously one of those countries. It's this huge trading partner with America, but Russia, I suppose it's fair to say, is an enemy of America. But there are other countries along the Silk Road, all China's trading partners. Particularly places like Iran, who definitely aren't friends of America. And all these countries along the Silk Road, they're part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. All those stans, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and stans that you don't even know what the bit is that comes first. They've all been net buyers of gold since, especially since 2022. And they're all gradually reducing their US dollar holdings and increasing their gold holdings. And actually, they're not reducing their US dollar holdings. They're reducing their holdings of US debt. There's a slight difference. They've still got plenty of US dollars, but so China's US Treasury holdings have halved over the last 10 years. And they're just slowly, but they're not making a big noise about it. They're just accumulating. And China's gold holdings, as I've said many times on many other podcasts, are at least 5 times what they say they are. Well, at least 4 times what they say they are. And I go through it in great detail in the book if you want to read the mathematics of it. But China says it's got 2,500 tons. It's got 8 to 15,000 tons, in my opinion. But it's when you look at the maths of it, you realise that 40,000 tons, 30 to 40,000 tons of gold have made their way to China this century, either through mining or through imports. And you go, well, where's it gone? And a lot of it's gone into private hands, but a lot of it's gone into the state's hands. But there's this big process going as de-dollarization. So there's one huge thing that is taking place. But there is also this issue of Triffin's dilemma. Now, Triffin's dilemma is this idea that whoever is the global reserve currency will inevitably run deficits with the rest of the world. And the dollar is obviously the world reserve currency, and the dollar and America has been running deficits with the rest of the world. And this is because the rest of the world has to make stuff in order to get US dollars, which it does. But the US has to export US dollars in order that the rest of the world can have US dollars. So it makes this trade deficit with the rest of the world inevitable. And the result of this has been the decline of US manufacturing, especially accelerated since 1971, when the US abandoned gold, and the rise of Chinese manufacturing and manufacturing elsewhere. Now, Trump has made it very clear numerous times over that he wants to restore the Rust Belt, that he wants to get American manufacturing again. That's what tariffs are all about. It's what the weakening US dollar is all about. But it's not possible while the US dollar remains the global reserve currency. And J.D. Vance gets this. Vance has actually said that the dollar status as reserve currency is a tax on American producers, and it is. Now, it's not just rhetoric, Trump going, I want to champion the American working classes and American production. He genuinely believes it, because it's all he ever talks about. When he was not president, when he was competing to be president and in the last presidency. And he didn't really get it right in the last presidency. And, tariffs are genuine. So, of course there's a lot of rhetoric, but it is genuine as well. But it's also important for strategic reasons, because during COVID, America was found with its trousers down. Critical goods, it was reliant on Chinese supply chains. And so, America realised it can't be reliant on Chinese supply chains, especially when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Russia was able to make munitions at a faster speed than NATO was because of this problem with supply chains. So it has to get manufacturing back to the US. And that's not easy because, the US has just lost its skill base because of generation of not manufacturing. And so Scott Bessent, the Treasury, they get Triffin's dilemma. And so they are sacrificing the US dollar's role as global reserve currency in order to get manufacturing back to the US, they realise that that is a price that they have to pay. Trump, I'm not sure entirely gets it, but Besant and Vance totally do. And Trump probably does because he's cleverer than people think he is. He plays the clown, but he's obviously cleverer than people make out. Everyone insults Trump's intelligence, and but they're like, well, you go and get elected as US president then.
Exactly.
It's not that easy. And I'm sure we'd all like to be US president if we could.
I would say I wouldn't like to be US president.
Okay, well, maybe for a day. Anyway, so what is going to replace the US dollar as global reserve currency? There isn't a national currency that can do that job. Maybe the euro? No. Euros, forget it. Western Europe's in decline. The euro's just a technocracy. Trump doesn't like the EU. It's not going to happen. Chinese yuan? Well, it's not freely exchangeable. It's, maybe eventually, but not now. It's nowhere near ready. It's not an international currency. So it has to be gold. Maybe Bitcoin, but it has to be gold for now. And both China and the US are happy for that to happen because they own lots of gold. The US has got 8,000 tons. I know it hasn't been audited, but there's a lot of... We'll just assume it's there. Maybe it isn't. If it isn't, the US could be in trouble. But there's plenty of mining in the US, and it has means of accumulating more gold.
I don't know if you saw the tweet by Trump that said he who holds the gold holds the power, or something along those lines.
He who holds the gold makes the rules.
Yeah, that was it exactly. Yeah, so presumably
quote.
they are kind of comfortable with their position in terms of like the gold holdings.
Well, the thing is, gold has always had this role in international politics. It's always been the reserve currency. I mean, in international politics, in the way that we now know them, have only really existed for maybe 200 years or something. But gold has always had this role. And it's always been the reserve currency, and it's neutral. So they're happy to sacrifice some of the US dollar status as reserve currency to gold. And so that is what is underpinning this bull market now. De-dollarization and this move away from the dollar back to gold. Now, I'm contradicting myself because at the beginning of the interview, I said, beware, the bull markets of the 70s and the noughties ended up with us thinking we were returning to a gold standard. And that is actually underpinning this one. It's more than just debasement of money.
Yeah.
And but there is a geopolitical shift taking place to gold, and that is what is underpinning this bull market, and we'll keep it going for a bit longer, in my view. Maybe not till I don't think we return to a gold standard, but it's certainly a narrative, and it's an actual thing. And you would be wise to own some gold in your portfolio because of this, what is going on.
Right, that's a nice segue. So in terms of owning gold, when you think about our audience of poor millionaires, and that's the people we define as people with investable net worth of between $1 to $20 million, what role do you kind of envisage gold playing for that group of people, and how do you personally view gold as an asset class that fits in with kind of like a wider portfolio management philosophy?
Well, it depends on your aim, really. I have a phrase that I'm very pleased with: put 10% of your net worth in gold and hope it doesn't go up. I actually thought that was an old Wall Street saying, and I Googled it and spent a lot of time researching it. It turned out the person who coined it was me. But it's a lovely phrase, and it's a good way to invest by. And I just think everyone should have some gold in their portfolio. But while this, if you're looking to make money and grow your wealth, well, that's not really what gold is for. Gold is more to keep what you've got. Obviously, you can make bets on gold and leverage bets and options and futures and all that kind of thing. And a lot of people do, and they make a lot of money out of it. And so if you think gold's going to go up, and you're a guy with 1 to 20 million quid and you want to turn that 1 to 20 million quid to 40 or 50 million quid, then you can do that and play the options and futures game. And we are now, after a long, long bear market, in a bull market for mining stocks, finally. And so you can make a lot of money investing in mining stocks. Beware, you can lose a lot of money investing in mining stocks, particularly in a bear market. And they lose their, even good companies lose their value very, very quickly. So, position sizing and risk management and all of that. But, if you find a development play, for example, you know, so there's you might have a company that's building a mine and it's about to get that mine producing, and once you turn a development play into a producing mine, it's transformational for the company, and revenues come in and suddenly the share price goes up. Or you might find an explorer that's got a little that finds got some land staked and it strikes gold. Or you might find another explorer that's got some land staked and it knows that there's 1 million ounces there, and it drills it and it shows that there's 2 million ounces there. Well, you make a lot of money in all of these developments. So there's all sorts of different ways of playing the gold mining game. There's no shortage of mining companies to invest in. A lot of them are run by scoundrels. A lot of them are just lifestyle companies run for the benefits of management. But a lot of them are genuine mining companies and can make you a lot of money. And just be careful which you choose. If you want my picks, I write about them on the Flying Frisbee. If you want to look at my choices, and there are no shortage of other choice, newsletter writers writing about gold as well, gold mining. It's the one area I know really well, but I've just said one more bull market in mining, and I'm done with the sector because I'm just done with it. And then a bull market comes along and everything's going up, and you're like, I've got to put more money into it. But you mining, don't be scared to take profits on the way.
Yeah. Mining is notoriously capricious.
It is. I mean, so there was a bull market in mining that went basically from 2001 to 2011. And then between 2011 and 2015, mining stocks lost about over 95% of their value. A lot of them went to zero. A lot of people were wiped out. It was incredible, that bear market. And I guess the magnitude of the bear market was because of the magnitude of the bull market which preceded it. But 2001 to 2011 was an incredible bull market. And companies, after the Bre-X scandal, when that was a mining scam in Indonesia, a Canadian company, mining was washed out and on the floor. And mining companies were incredibly cheap, and they went up and up and up. They had a big correction in 2006. They had another big correction in 2008, and 2009 to 2011 was an incredible time, but it didn't last forever. And so I suppose there were 3 phases to that bull market and 3 big corrections on the way. And the first phase was when maybe the most money was made. There were 10 baggers all over the place, but people didn't believe it. And I think maybe we're coming to the end of the first phase of this bull market. Maybe it's got a little bit longer to go, but I've lived through 15 years of bear market. And it's horrible. And there's been 2 bits of respite, one early 2016, one during COVID. But basically, it was 3 years of 15 years of bear market. So maybe my mind's conditioned and I'm not being greedy enough. But I've cut my teeth in a bull market and then in a bear market. They're horrible. And so for me, one more bull market and then I'm done.
So if we've got a bit longer for this bull market to run.
I think so. I would say gold is in innings 6 of 9. Gold mining is maybe in innings 3.
Right. Okay. So I'm just thinking about some of the more optimistic, shall we say, forecasts from some of the commentators. Thinking about people like, for instance, Jim Rickards, and talks about gold at, I don't know what it is, $15,000-$20,000 an ounce or something like that.
Oh. Okay.
Is that kind of like out of the bounds?
Don't listen to those guys. Jim's a nice guy, but he just broken record, and he's been saying it forever. I think $7,000 by 2030 is a perfectly reasonable target. It's not even double where we are now.
Okay.
And gold mining companies are going to make so much money at $7,000. 15, 20,000, something very bad has to happen to US dollar for that to happen. It's not impossible, but I wouldn't count on it.
Right.
I just, people get a lot of headlines, you get a lot of readers. Gold's going to go. If I write an article why gold's going to $25,000, I will get a lot of readers. So if I'm in the business of selling my newsletter, I'm going to write articles on that. But I try to have a bit more integrity.
So, but you're obviously a believer in gold, and I'm just wondering if you're a fan of any of the other precious metals. So, thinking of silver, platinum being the obvious ones, and these are also commodities that have had a pretty decent run lately. And how do you view these in relation to the gold and what's their potential in terms of investment?
Silver is extraordinary, and if there's one thing silver will do, it is guaranteed it will disappoint you. There is no other metal with as much promise as silver. It's just there is silver in absolutely everything. But it's important to remember the monetary role of silver disappeared after the gold rushes of the 19th century in 1850 most of the world was on bimetallic standards. By 1900 most of the world was on gold standards alone. Silver's role as money is gone. So just forget that. And there's still some loyalty to silver dollars in the US, but it's tradition. But silver itself is an industrial metal that is used in everything, where it's finding increasing usage is in solar panels, and solar panels are, we're making a lot of solar panels. So, the fundamental, and obviously we use silver in electronics and all sorts of other applications. But so the fundamental case for silver is very strong, but it's been strong for silver for years, and it never delivers. But the silver market's been in deficit for 4 years in a row, but $50 silver is a huge line in the sand. It was the peak in 1980. It was the peak in 2011. And where are we now? As we speak, we're at $46, $47 silver. So we're coming up for a retest of a huge technical level. Like a 50-year technical level. And if you're into these kind of things, it's done a massive cup and handle pattern. And I would expect silver to hit 50 and then bounce down. But if silver goes through 50, it can really launch like $100 silver, $200 silver even. It's not impossible. And silver mining companies, they trade at a bit of a premium, but they'll make so much money. So you want to have some silver because its potential is so extraordinary, but never underestimate its capacity to disappoint. Platinum, I've been beating the drum about platinum for so long, I just got sick of it and stopped beating the drum about it. Platinum is more valuable than, and I haven't been as long platinum as I should have been. More fool me. Too long waiting for it. But platinum is more expensive than gold. It should be more expensive than gold by a factor of 25%. So if gold is 1,000, platinum should be 1,250. Platinum records, platinum cards, everything platinum is more valuable than gold. And where is platinum today? I haven't even looked. 1,500, 1,500, and gold's at 3,700. So gold is almost 2.5, 3 times the platinum price. It's absurd. Platinum should be $4,500. If platinum was $4,500 and gold was $3,700, that would be right. That would be normal. And platinum's $1,400, $1,500. And it's just totally overlooked. And the other thing about platinum is it's so supply constrained because it's dependent on a little bit on Russia, but it's mostly dependent on the Bushveld, one reed part of South Africa where all the platinum is. And you just need some South African problems to take place there, and the platinum supply is gone. So it's such a vulnerable market. But this has been the case for ages. But yeah, so platinum is cheap, but again, like silver, it's been cheap for a long time, and don't underestimate its capacity to disappoint. But it's a bull market now. I think we're going into a bull market for metals more generally. Long overdue, but we seem to be, and the base metals and the industrial metals will catch up with gold. Gold's usually the leader.
It's going to be fascinating just watching this market play out, and I'm sure
you've got to have a position in mining.
But yeah, Dominic, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I'd love to get you back on maybe when you launch your next book. I don't know what that will be, but I'd love to have you back on the show. And I'd just like to wish you all the best of luck with The Secret History of Gold. It's a brilliant book. And,
you're very kind, James. You're very kind. And if your readers or listeners or viewers want to catch up with what I do, theflyingfrisbee.com is my website, my newsletter, and you should all subscribe to my newsletter. It's absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant. Cheers, Dominic. Thanks again to Dominic for his time today. Don't forget to give us a follow and a like if you enjoyed the pod. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time for part 2 in this 3-part series on gold. where Clive Thompson and I will be delving into the potential for a revaluation of the US gold reserves.